Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker shows, debt slave serfs, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And so Trump has triumphantly announced that we have a so-called peace deal in the Israeli-Gaza conflict. And it all looks really good, and I'm trying to be excited about it. And it's quite a feather in Trump's cap if he pulls this off, but it's very problematic right from the beginning. So let's step back and look at the last month or two. We've had mass demonstrations of millions of people in cities all over the world protesting about the Gaza genocide. We've had Netanyahu visit the UN and give a highly defiant, inflammatory speech in which most of the UN members walked out. The UN Council has declared that there is officially a genocide in Gaza. And so the next component to think about is the fact that Israel has gotten almost everything it's wanted. 83% of buildings in Gaza are either destroyed or damaged. All the desalination plants are destroyed. All the universities are destroyed. All the hospitals are destroyed. And the players discussing the peace have no illusions about the fact that Gaza is unlivable, and it's been designed that way. And in fact, even during this week with the so-called peace negotiations going on, Israel's been using car bombs, 10 a day, putting them into highly populated areas of Gaza, some of them up to 7 tons of explosives, causing great carnage. And the airstrikes have been continued going on, and the IDF has continued to push forward into Gaza. So that's the groundwork that we're going forward from, and we know that Israel is going to get what it wants. They are defiant. They don't care what the international community thinks, and they will push forward with their agenda, and their agenda is almost reached. And even Trump, when asked about displacement of Gaza Palestinians, was tight-lipped and very uncomfortable. And of course, in the past, he's discussed moving all of the Palestinians out of Gaza, and they've all come out and said that Gaza, in its current form, is unlivable. So these are a lot of factors we have to put into play. And so far, we have what's called phase one of this ceasefire, and that's a cessation of hostilities, which hasn't stopped. And supposedly this next week the hostages are going to be released. And people in Israel have also demonstrated against Netanyahu. And I saw a speech recently with the American components in the peace negotiations giving a speech, and they were booing Netanyahu, but they were praising Donald Trump. And so my feeling is that Netanyahu said all along that if they release the hostages, all of this can be stopped. But my feeling is that once the hostages are released, all bets are off, and Israel will turn around and go back to what it was doing. One complication, and it's a very interesting one, of course, Trump has said all along that there'd be no U.S. troops involved, but now supposedly 200 U.S. troops are going there to intervene and make sure that the ceasefire holds and accommodate massive amounts of aid coming into Gaza. And so that could be very problematic. What happens if U.S. soldiers end up getting killed? And then we have the peace plan itself. There's 20 points, and overall it's an excellent plan and addresses a lot of issues, but there's a lot of complications that are going to be hard to get past. So phase one is in place. But phase two and moving forward are going to be very problematic. Disarming Hamas is going to be very complicated. Outlawing Hamas from having any participation in future governing of Gaza is problematic. And just the whole setup is so full of landmines and traps and pitfalls that it's just hard for me to believe moving forward to further phases in the so-called peace plan are going to go smoothly. And the other part of that, of course, is that Israel is defiant. They do what they want to do, and I think they will continue to do so. A good example of that is there's supposedly a ceasefire called in Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah, and there are daily airstrikes in Lebanon by Israel. And in fact, Israel's been bombing 8 other countries over the last several months. And so a ceasefire really kind of means nothing. And we've seen that before. There was a supposed ceasefire with Ukraine against Donbass, and then they spent 8 years bombing Donbass before Russia finally moved in. So all these issues make me very skeptical moving forward that there's actually going to be a peace. There's going to be some kind of ceasefire, and moving forward, I just can't imagine that Israel's not going to find an excuse to finish the job. And I also can't believe that at some point a lot of Palestinians are going to have to move out of Gaza because it is just not livable, and by design. And so even though Trump is denying that Palestinians are going to be displaced out of Gaza, he did at one point say that they would all have to be moved out of Gaza to rebuild it. And that brings us to another step in what I think a lot of this is all about. At some point, they're going to have to displace enough Palestinians so that a massive reconstruction can take place. And there's some estimates that it would take 50 years just to remove all the rubble. And I think things could be expedited and things could be moving further, expedited so that things move ahead further. But it's also a big cash cow for a lot of players, including BlackRock, that want to move in and make a lot of money off of reconstructing Gaza. And then we also have all the Israeli blueprints of what they imagine Gaza to turn into, which is a Riviera of the Mediterranean, and it will be populated by very rich Israelis and others. And so that ultimately seems to be the goal. So I think the goal is still the complete destruction of Gaza, the displacement of Palestinians, the construction of a new, modern, rich area of beach property that will be part of Israel, and that more steps towards a great Israel will be created here, and that things will go on as usual. So for the moment, I congratulate Trump. I think that Trump put a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. Netanyahu doesn't want this to stop, has never wanted this to stop. He's ruled out a two-state solution, so that's not going to happen. And my feeling is that Trump pressured him enough because Trump wanted this feather in his cap. And I don't want to discount the fact that maybe he does have some noble motives in having this war stop and the carnage stop, but he doesn't seem to have any problem with the genocide. He doesn't have any problem with continuing to arm Israel and supporting the Israeli state in everything that they do, including the bombing of Iran. And so I think the original agenda will move forward. I think Trump pressured Netanyahu to get this feather in his cap, and that it will unravel. It just seems doomed to unravel. There's just too much hate by Netanyahu, particularly in his right-wing government, for Palestinians, and they've made it clear there will be no two-state solution. So I think things will move forward as I outlined, and even though Trump has denied supporting Israel in annexing the West Bank, I still think that Israel will annex the West Bank at some point. There's been dramatic moves over the last 6 months and year, in the last 2 years, to make that happen, and it will end up ultimately in a very dramatic demolition of one of Islam's most sacred sites, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the new temple of Israel will be built. So that's what I'm looking forward to. So things could potentially get even worse, particularly if that happens, if the capital of Israel is moved to Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is destroyed, and Gaza continues to be decimated. Sadly, that is my prediction. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.